We've all been going to school. Think of it. Everybody in this room, maybe you're still going to school, or you have been going to school, but we've all, at some point in our life, been going to school. Everybody in here, everybody outside. We know about schools. And schools, they play such an important role in our lives. I mean, they seem to be the key to happiness. A happy school life could make you a happy person. Now, what about your school life? How did your teachers treat you? Think of it. Did they show you that you were a person that they really liked? Did they see you for who you are? Or did they not? Did they not really care for you? Did they not really like you? These feelings are so important because they seem to follow us in life. Now, we all know feelings of being unhappy. Feelings like worrying, feeling sad, feelings that go into you and make you feel alone, and maybe you are the only one who has this problem. Feeling outside of a community or even a class. And these feelings, they are absolutely normal, but we do not want them in our schools because they seem to transform into life. Now, my daughter is called Lily, and she's 12 years old. And her class, they had a new teacher this year. So the teacher started the parents' meeting by saying, "Hello, I'm going to spend the next 3 months on working with getting to know your children because I want to know who they are and how they learn." 3 months later, he came back and he said to us, "Now I know your children, I know who they are, and I know exactly how to teach them." And I have to add, he said, "You have some wonderful children. Oh, and this is what you really want to hear as a parent, isn't it? Oh, our children are so wonderful." Anyway, my daughter Lily came home sometime later and said to me, "Dad, it's like he understands the way I think. Now I just love maths." And I've never heard that before. So if a teacher can do that, it's just amazing, isn't it? Anyway, when we travel around the world, we work with teachers from all walks of life and all places around the globe. And they all agree, what a good idea to do it that way. But sadly, they are rarely given the time to do it. Because the focus in most school systems all over the world is on academic skills and testing to see if they understood that mathematical problem, and that's it. Now, we find that this is a huge problem, that school systems do not prioritize this, because more and more scientific reports can tell us that if you work with the children's happiness, they perform better when you test them, and they perform better in their academic skills. So it's crazy. We know what to do. We have to work with the children's social competence, their relationship building, their happiness, but we do not do it. We know it's the right thing to do, and then we do something else because it's much more easy to test and test and test. This is absolute madness, and we have to stop it because education is not about filling a bucket. Education is about lighting a fire.
So let us just travel to the Nordic countries and investigate happiness in the cold north. What can we learn from these frostbitten Vikings? For many years, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark have ranked top in many world happiness reports. And many people in the Nordic countries makes fun about this, because on a rainy, cold November afternoon, it might seem like a joke. But it's not. There is actually some truth to it. We investigated the criteria behind the reports and found out that it actually really does make sense. One of the main criteria behind the report is to investigate the level of trust in a population. And we do have a high level of trust in the Nordic countries. We trust the state, we trust the government, we trust the school system, and in general, we simply just trust each other. A friend of ours from Spain lived a year in the Nordic countries, and we asked her, what is different here from other countries you've been to? And she answered that, well, one thing you notice immediately when you come to the Nordic countries is that when you go to a cafe, you're not afraid to leave your pram with a sleeping baby outside the cafe. And it really says a lot about the Nordic countries, and it says a lot about how trusting the Nordic people are.
So do you trust a person that you've never met before? On a worldwide basis, an average of 25% of people trust a stranger. In the Nordic countries, it's 78%. So you can say that the feeling of trust is a part of our DNA, and it's strongly related to our happiness. Now, the feeling of trust is something that's developed over time, and it's built on our experiences with positive and strong and trustful relationships. And that is something that's deeply rooted in our school culture. Now, as Kasper said, we've experienced and met many, many fantastic teachers all over the world, doing a great job, planning good everyday teaching, managing the classroom, etc., etc. But the only major difference in the Nordic countries is the way that we work with the students' happiness. And let me just stress straight away, it's not because we claim that the Nordic school systems are flawless, because they're not. But we do believe that we have an idea worth spreading here. So I think there are two main reasons why we seem to succeed in forming happy human beings. First of all, we spend time minimizing the distance between the teacher and the student, because that trustful relationship is the key that enables the teacher to understand what the student understands. So that's putting him in a position where we can ask just the right question that will make the children grow as students and grow as human beings. This takes time, though, for the teachers. It takes time to create a dialogue with the students. It takes time to ask them and to carefully listen to what they say and what they think and how they feel. And it takes time to use that knowledge to build on, to challenge them just where they are, and to make them believe that relationships are actually valuable. But we can now prove scientifically that this is a good investment. So secondly, we actually test the students' happiness. So we measure their well-being and their feelings about school. It turns out that more than 90% of our children actually like going to school, and that's amazing, of course. At the same time, obviously, we're also worried about the 10% that are not happy. And to illustrate what you can achieve working with the students' happiness, we would like to tell you a little story from real life, where a young boy was among the 10% of unhappy students.
When I was a teenager, I lived a very normal family life. I grew up with my mother and my father and my little sister. I did quite well in school. I spent time on healthy hobbies, and I had some decent friends with good manners. But one day it all changed. I came home from school, and both my parents were at home, and they immediately asked me to sit down and listen carefully. Then they told me that they were getting divorced, and I hadn't noticed anything, so my whole world just fell apart. Maybe I should just mention that today I'm totally okay again. Everything is back on track. But at the moment, it just seemed like a disaster. And I thought it was extremely unfair, and I got mad at my parents. So I started all kinds of stupid things just to make them angry. And it worked out pretty good. I started skipping classes from school. I came home later than I was told to. I started smoking cigarettes. And then I started hanging out with the bad company, especially Dennis and Brian, who were not known as the best kids on the block. One day, there was a party down at our school, and I was going there together with Dennis and Brian. And we were sitting 3 people on Brian's new moped. He got new mopeds all the time. I never really figured out how, but he did. So we came down to the school, and during the party, we thought that we needed a cigarette. So we went down to the smoking room at the school. Yeah, those were the days where you were allowed to smoke in the Nordic schools. But the rules said that you should be at least 12 years old to get into the smoking room. We don't do that anymore. We changed that, okay? But in the smoking room, we found all the other lads, and we were having a lot of fun when there was suddenly a big bang, and the door was kicked open, and into the room comes Simon. And with him, he has Joachim from my own class. And Simon, he was dragging Joachim in, holding his long ponytail. And then he shouted out loud that today is the day where Joachim is going to get a haircut. And then he showed us all a big pair of scissors. And unfortunately, he went over to me and said, "Come on, Rasmus, come on, cut his hair, do it." And I took the pair of scissors. I say, "Oh no, I don't want to. I can't do that. It's Joachim from my own class. I don't want to." But I knew I didn't have a chance, or a choice, sorry. So all the other guys were standing around me and shouting that I had to do it. So at last I just decided to go for it. So with shaking hands, I went over to Joachim. I grabbed his ponytail, and I was just about to cut his hair off when Michael, one of my teachers, enters the room and shouted, "Stop, stop, stop, it's enough," and I threw the scissor away. And I swear to God that Michael just looked me straight in the eyes, and he went over to me and took me on my shoulders and lifted me up in straight arms. And then he sat me down on a chair. And luckily, he sat down beside me and started talking to me, and he said a lot of clever things that I really needed to hear. First of all, he said to me that he'd noticed that since my parents divorced, I started spoiling so many things to myself and to a lot of other people. Then he mentioned that he actually knew the situation personally, because when he was a teenager, his parents also divorced, and he surely remembered all the feelings about it and how he blamed himself a lot of things in that matter. Then second of all, he said to me that he had seen this pattern with so many kids in that kind of sad situation, and he convinced me that my reaction was very normal. And then finally, he said something to me that I never thought I should hear from one of my own teachers. He said to me that when his parents divorced, he'd also started doing all kinds of stupid things. He started stealing in shops. He started skipping classes from school. He started lying to his own parents. And I just couldn't believe it. Michael, stealing and lying. I couldn't believe it. But all Michael's words went straight into my heart and to my brain, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. And that day I went home from school. I went straight up to my room and I sat down in my favorite chair. And here I started wondering what to do with my life. And all Michael's words were just swimming around in my head. And for the first time in my life, I thought that maybe adults could be useful somehow.
Thank you, Rasmus. This is the way we work in the Nordic countries. I mean, teachers all over the world will say, "Oh, I know these feelings." But you have to understand that we spend time on minimizing the distance between the teacher and the student. Now, we do it because 150 years ago, the famous Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, he wrote a text called The Art of Helping. And this has been massaged into the brains of teachers all over the Nordic countries. Now, Kierkegaard talks about working on 3 different levels. Level number 1 is to seek equality. So I want to convince Rasmus that he's okay, he's normal. There's nothing wrong with him, and other kids have the same feelings. So I want to seek equality. Another thing I want to do is I want to show it from an adult perspective. I am the grown-up, and of course I will stop Rasmus for doing all these crazy things, cutting hair and all that. I will stop that. So I will stop him from doing this. So that's the grown-up perspective, you could say. And thirdly, Kierkegaard says that you must humble yourself towards the student to make him understand that you have done something in your life which could remind of what just happened with him. So you tell the student about things where you were not perfect. Now, Michael tells Rasmus about wrongdoings in his own past, stealing and lying. And this takes away the professional teacher's mask and reveals that there is a real person behind the mask. And this is what we call to humble yourself. And it's such an important part of forming relationships with the children. Now, we'd like to put you all into a time machine, because now we will go 150 years back in time and listen to the original text from Søren Kierkegaard.
The art of helping. If one is truly to succeed in leading a person to a specific place, one must first and foremost take care to find him where he is and begin there. This is the secret in the entire art of helping. Anyone who cannot do this is himself under a delusion if he thinks he's able to help someone else. In order truly to help someone else, I must understand more than he. But certainly, first and foremost, understand what he understands. If I do not do that, then my greater understanding does not help him at all. If I nevertheless want to assert my greater understanding, then it's because I'm vain or proud. Then basically, instead of benefiting him, I really want to be admired by him. But all true helping begins with a humbling. The helper must first humble himself under the person he wants to help, and thereby understand that to help is not to dominate, but to serve. That to help is not to be the most dominating, but the most patient. That to help is a willingness for the time being to put up with being in the wrong and not understanding what the other understands. We're not done yet. In a minute, more.
Relationships, probably the most important key to happiness.
Let's start a happy school revolution, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.